Perfect. And this is ideally this will be interactive. Well, it can be. It doesn't have to be. Um, you can sit there in silence and just sit there and nod and shrug your shoulders, or you can be a part of the conversation. And what it's the reason why I'm doing this, I'm actually trying to sort stuff out of my head, and this is the way I think. Right. So it's one thing to actually sit down with a piece of paper and a book and you're making notes, but until you actually start talking about something and actually start processing it, it's amazing what you learn when you begin to try to teach something. Because commiserating inside your head just doesn't work. It's not all that effective. So, I mean, if you've been around me at all, and of course I know some of you have been around. We've been hanging out together for a while in conversation. One of the things that I've been fascinated by is the concept around stability, right? So and of course, I got into it on a physical aspect through training and through orthopedic training and working with people with brand new knees and new hips and just rewiring people. And I realized that, stability wasn't actually that complicated. I mean, it was boring, but it wasn't complicated. And when I realized that people, quite often people come in and they'd seen a physiotherapist, and they were given things to do, but people just never, either they didn't understand how powerful nuances are when it comes to physical training, and they just weren't committed to it. And it became that, what they call the Pareto distribution of 80% of people won't get it and 20% of people will. So a small percentage of people will always seem to succeed, and 80%, and most of them won't. And so I was trying to play around with this idea of how do you make it more accessible? How do you make information more accessible? So of course that's where if you've been in the training program, the whole SAM acronym was developed to really try to take a whole bunch of words and a whole bunch of concepts and just squash it into a real simple concept and just do these three things. Right. So symbolism is important. Acronyms are symbols of tend to be more complex ideas. But then, of course, I took a step into the world of psychology, mainly my own, and only my own because I saw a lot of my problems reflected in people I was dealing with. And so I thought if I could fix them, I could fix me, right? And that's kind of how it goes, right? That's kind of how the process happens. Again, this has been 15-year dialogue, 10 years really heavily more in the kind of the neuropsych part of it, and even the last little while, I've been looking at the structure. We talk about bad memories, good memories. We get into this dialogue around it, but nobody ever asks what is a memory. What is the constituents of a memory? Like, what is it? What is it actually, as opposed to the information inside of it? We're not so curious. No sound here. 1 second here. People are upset. There's no sound coming through. I don't know.
I got
it. They're yelling at me, no sound. 1 second here. I'm gonna try. Okay, guys, they're yelling at me. I'm gonna shut this. I had another thing recording. I'm gonna shut this off here and start again. These guys here. All right. Okay, let's try this again. So anyhow, here we go. Let's see. See, these guys can hear me now. All right. So so I got into this conversation around memory. Like, so what is memory? And then of course, I was lost down this rabbit hole into trying to figure out actually how memory actually is designed. And so I'm at this point between two different aspects of memory. One's called procedural memory, and procedural memory is really just like it sounds. It's the driving my vehicle as a form of procedural memory, right? Knowing how to run is a form of procedural memory. So it's procedures, right? So there's not necessarily a lot of emotions attached to it. Now it's make it more simple than of course it really is. But it's that mechanical aspect of just we do things by rote. Episodic memory is different, right? Episodic memory is just as it sounds as well. It's episodes, right? It's just the biography or the history of who we are and all the experiences that we've had. All right, now I'm going to see. Sorry, guys, I'm just bouncing around here. All right, making sure. Yeah, guys, I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on here, guys. So. Okay. Oh, I'm going to do this here. One sec. I know this is a pain in the ass, guys. I'm sorry to be such a nuisance here. I was trying to be accommodating here, and
we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I have two things running at the same time here, and the secondary one it wasn't working.
It's all right. I can hear you okay too.
Okay. All right. So here we go. I'll turn this one down here. That's right. So yeah. So again, when we go through that process about procedural memory and episodic memory, and then episodic memory, that's the part I became curious about because how do we think? Like, what is the purpose of memory? What is the purpose of memory? The purpose of memory, it's an archive of information so we can make future decisions. Basically, right? I mean, what else is it for? So we access the episodes of our life, right? So, I mean, it's like, I have books all over my house, right? So I access, because there's biographies, there's details, there's information there that I need to access so I can make decisions about what's in front of me or what's currently in front of me that I'm contending with, or what I might be looking at in the future. So the interesting thing about episodic memory is that one of the challenges that we have with it is that the information that's stored, what did we find, or what is easier to access inside of our memory? What things do we find are we able to pull it much more easily than not? And quite often it's negative information, the negative references of our life are way more accessible than the positive references. Now we've been in this war against negativity forever, right? As long as I can remember, the personal development movement has really pushed forward, and they've really been at this war around negativity. And I think it's actually the wrong way to look at it, because what is the purpose of a negative emotion? If you go back far enough in history, not just within the last 100 years, but if you go back, let's say 3,000 years, why was it important actually to have a negative awareness? Negative awareness actually allowed us to stay alive. We needed to be vigilant and be very aware of our surroundings, because for most of man's history, life was very adversarial. Right? There's a lot of things that were going to take us out, whether it was a warring tribe, whether there's a snake in a tree, there was a wild animal, right? There's Mother Nature was trying to kill us, right? On all different levels. So, we were really being challenged at every turn. So it was really important to be able to actually, to access, to really have this really vigilant personal alarm system that was actually keeping track of all these things going on around us. And the interesting thing about negativity, though, is that negativity is actually very rich in detail and nuance. Right? So when you think about if I'm going through the jungle, and we'll take it back to the primordial self, I'm wandering through the jungle, and I'm learning through my ancestors, as I'm being taught by my grandfather, and as he got taught by his grandfather, and we're being taught the rules of the jungle, right? Don't eat that mushroom, right? In this type of tree lives this kind of snake. In this part of the water lives this kind of animal, this kind of reptile. And so we began to develop this dialogue and this really rich detail and this rich kind of biography of the possible hazards inside of our environment. So it was important. You needed details around the positive, negative impacts of the environment on your life. Right? Does that make sense? So our nervous system is, I would say, it's probably, from what it looks like, about 10 times more designed to really to deal with negative input and to actually to deal with negative input as a survival mechanism. And so it doesn't only reference potential hazards, but it actually has a very rich set of details around it. And what's interesting is that positive emotions actually don't have that. Positive emotions, that's why people find it so hard to think about something positive. A positive emotion actually has very little nuance. It doesn't have the rich detail unless we actually go to explore it. That's why when I ask people, tell me, tell me 5 things about you that you really think should be changed and you're really kind of working on. Oh, well, let me tell you, 5 only? Really? I got a few. So people can write down the 5 things easily and probably with pretty good detail. But if I ask you, give me 5 really extraordinary things about who you are as a human being and what you contribute to the world, that's tough. People really struggle with that. So, if our wiring, our basic biological wiring is to the negative, and it's not in a negative connotation. It's just the way we're wired, and we're trying to get rid of it instead of learning how to use it. And I think this even taps into Carl Jung when he talks about the shadow part of yourself. And it's a part of Jungian philosophy. And actually, I'm just reading a book that's co-authored by Marianne Williamson, Deborah Ford, and Deepak Chopra. And it's really talking about the shadow, but the integration of what we think is the negative part of who we are. And it's who we are. It's a part of our wiring. So we're trying to stifle it with positive platitudes and happy memes and good acts, we think the negative part of our thought process and perhaps the anger and fear is something that a lot of us seem to be ashamed of, and we're trying to throttle it down rather than learning how to use it powerfully. So it's pretty fascinating, but here's the interesting thing. So I'll loop back into when I was talking about what is what is memory and how we access memory, and again, if you've been in this conversation before, you'll know that all raw data coming in is visual, auditory, kinesthetic predominantly, right? So we have visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, sense of smell, gustatory, what we taste. And all that information coming in means 0. It has no identifiable trait until it actually enters into your body, and your nervous system uptakes it and reference all that information, what I'm saying, what you're seeing, right, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, and you reference that against a previous experience, right? That's simply how we navigate around the world. Right? That's why that's why you're telling babies, don't take the spoon and push it in a light socket, right? Don't touch the dog. That's hot. Don't put that in your nose. Don't put that in your ear. Don't do this. Don't do that. Because they have no reference point, right? So they're just accessing information, and you're accessing your information to guide them through that process. And your introduction to them in detail is negative, is it not? These are potentially negative events, negative consequences come from doing that. So they develop and the tone of your voice amplifies the sense of urgency around that conversation. So they learn fear and they learn negativity from you trying to keep them safe, and rightly so. So it's just, and again, it's not to make anybody feel bad about bad parenting moments, because I'm pretty sure the octave went a little bit too high at times, right, depending on what kind of day you had. So, but here's the interesting thing. So we know that procedural memory is more about the mechanics of movement, and even that can be affected by trauma. But if you think about it, if you go through and let's say this is a part of your episodic memory, and inside that episodic memory are episodes, right? And each of these little blocks here, not very good blocks. Actually, let me do this faster here, so we're not here all night. All right. Inside all these little spaces, poorly drawn spaces, that's a brain, it's all squishing there. There are various aspects of your life. They're episodes of your life, episodes of your experience. So when all the incoming information from what you see, from what you hear to what you feel, the brain has to go through these little quadrants and actually find something that is identifiably similar to what you're currently experiencing on the outside. And it creates a match. Now, the match may not be really accurate, but it's the closest representation that you have based on what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and that accesses the episode of your life that closely resembles the current context of your experience. You with me so far? Okay, is it all making sense? Like it's not really complicated, right? I mean, what do you play games with children, right? You got a bunch of cards. And you turn them face down. You flip up a pineapple, and you got to go find the pineapple, right? Pineapple, right? Elephant, clown, right? Banana. That's kind of what we're doing. It's kind of how we go through life. But one of the things is that we don't even question how we're responding to the environment. Like we rarely question. We just think that this is how I feel, and either I feel bad, or I feel good, or I'm afraid, or I'm intimidated. But regardless, how I'm feeling, and I simply accept it as gospel inside my body. I accept it as that it must be correct. And so we rarely question the feeling. And one of the reasons that we don't is that we never decided how specifically we wanted to feel. We know we still want to feel bad, but not wanting to feel bad does not tell you how to feel good. Right? Doesn't tell you, like, there's zero-sum information in that idea. So inside all these little quadrants, inside of all these memories, there's going to be memories are stored again through your senses. So it's either visual, it's either auditory, it's kinesthetic, right? It's olfactory or gustatory, right? So it's all about your five senses. Basically, it's the receiving antennas bringing the data in, and then your brain is attributing to something you previously experienced. And it's bringing that information forward to try to help create an idea of what the meaning of the environment that you're currently experiencing, what it really means. The problem that I find, and I have found actually the overreaching problem, is inside that memory, quite often, of course, there's going to be an emotional context, right? That emotional context, if the memory is from 1974, and it's 2019, is there a bit of water under the bridge between 1974 and 2019? Right? But in the context of that memory in 1974 is right here, and I'm accessing it, I'm also accessing the emotional status of who I was in 1974. Now, I don't know I'm doing that, I just get the feeling. And what is the difference between me as a 54-year-old male in 2019, or you as whatever age you are now? Are you emotionally different than you were in 1974, if you were even alive then? Right? Is it different? Absolutely. But you don't know you're accessing 1974. Like, it doesn't show up, and you're not getting a replay where, wow, I'm having this memory, but the colors are really bad, and the hairstyle is really, really terrible, and the clothes are really ridiculous, and I'm getting all those details, and and it just the cars are smell like gas because the engines were poorly made, and you don't get any of that detail. What you get is the emotional context. And if you get the emotional context of somebody who's so much your junior, having the emotional stability and the fragility of you at that stage shows up in your body, in your brain, and hijacks, basically what it does is hijacks your prefrontal cortex and takes over the executive center of your brain. You become them emotionally. And does emotions drive behavior? Yeah, hell yeah. And so why in the world would we allow the brain to go in and decide on its own accord without having any safeguards and any controls laid out to us at all, and allow it to go pick willy-nilly through our history banks and deciding on our behalf what things mean to us? And we just let it happen, right? And I think it's where we get these quotes where people say, Chris, it's so unlike you to be like that. It's so uncharacteristic of. Yeah, 2019, absolutely. Totally characteristic of him in 1974. So uncharacteristic of him now. We're not talking to Chris now. We're talking, this is Chris that's showing up. This guy here pushed him out of the way, shoved him into traffic, and took over for a little while. Has anybody ever had that experience? You know, it just you're in an environment. You get people I get triggered, right? And I really hate that word because it really it's to me it's sloughing off any responsibility. Yeah, they just trigger me. No, you're not paying attention. You didn't get triggered, right? You don't know how you didn't make the decision on how you want to show up and how you're going to show up in life. You didn't decide on the emotional context, the strength, the values, the virtues. We never decided that, and because we've pulled apart the fabric of religion and culture, and we've disseminated it, and especially North American culture, so badly into a watered down version that's almost meaningless. People don't know what they stand for anymore. And they haven't gone through that philosophical process, which we used to get from birth. Now we rarely get it at all because people think it's worthless. But it's not, because we need that structure. It's the same thing when I grew up in a hobby farm. When I was 6 years old, I'm digging holes in the ground. I'm carrying 4x4 posts. I'm mixing cement with a hoe and a wheelbarrow. When I was 13 years old, I was strong as a man. Right? We need the physical context and the structure of labor to make us physically strong, to keep us independent, and that's how the body thrives. Also, we used to have the environment, and regardless of what we believe of religion and religious history or Christianity, whatever philosophy that we may have a bug up our ass around, but the structure of culture at one point in time, despite all of its drawbacks, and there was plenty for sure, but it actually gave us a set of emotional guidelines and structure that actually made us pretty formidable. It gave us a belief system that we all shared collectively, and now we don't share much at all, right? So I found that was pretty interesting, right? So we're allowing the brain to go in and decide on our behalf. Which one, this is what's going on, and because I put no safeguards in place, I'm allowing my mind to just pick and choose what memory shows up. Now, are we in agreement that just makes sense? And you've had that experience, right? You've had that experience at some point in time where you spend a week apologizing for some stupid thing you said, but they triggered you, right? And it wasn't your fault that you had nothing, no safeguards in place. And then you end up putting your foot in your mouth, and then you're trying to find some way to get out of the mess you just created. So I keep going back and forth between this, and I go, well, how do you figure it out? Well, the beautiful comparison, and I'm trying to do a Einstein. I'm trying to find a unifying theory around certain things in life to make things really simple. So being a bodybuilder, I didn't think about being a bodybuilder was very useful for anything. It costs a lot of money. You always feed the machine. Clothes don't fit. People always accuse you of doing a bunch of drugs, right? You don't walk through doorways the same way. You're just generally not that flexible, and you're pretty much a stump, right? So, and I thought, but what was interesting, and I'm speaking a little sarcastic, but what was interesting about bodybuilding, and especially when I got into orthopedics and bodybuilding, became this really interesting mix, is that bodybuilders, one thing they do really, really well, besides wear shirts that are 2 sizes too small for their body, what they do really well is they have the capacity to actually go inside their mind and actually find a muscle group or a particular muscle and turn it on command. They have this muscle, they have this neurological specificity of movement. So they can actually turn their adductor thigh on. They can get the left pec to fire. They can get their trap to jump. And they have this beautiful control of all of the body parts. Now, that by itself is actually, it might be actually useful in a burlesque show, but why is it really relevant? Well, what's interesting is that training your body and being so inside your body and paying attention to what's going on, you become very aware to how training feels. It feels a certain way, right? If I want to make my back stronger, I want to be careful not to load my upper back. I want my lats to fire. I need to know what that feels like. And so when I'm training first, what I'm looking for is a feeling. I'm trying to find the feeling of the muscle. When I lose that feeling of the appropriate muscle, do you continue the exercise or do you stop? If you're running and you feel your knee, it doesn't feel good, do you go, well, it's a bad feeling, I'm just going to go with it. And you keep plodding along another 10 kilometers and wonder why your meniscus is gone. So the body gives us this beautiful resource of feeling, saying, well, but the thing is, we don't really pay attention to them, and we use vague things like, this feels good, and and I want to feel like I'm in shape, and very ambiguous. So specifically, when somebody says I want to feel in shape, they said what they want to do is they want to feel their shape. They want to feel their ass. They want to feel their back. They want to feel their abs. They want to feel the tone, because that feeling gives them a kinesthetic reference inside their mind. So when they look in the mirror, when you look in the mirror, that's what you see. You see what you feel. You don't see what you see. Is that cryptic, or does that make sense? Because you can take it one day and I can beat the hell out of you in the gym. You can do 3 or 4 days of training and every muscle sore, and it finally recovers a little bit so you can move around, look in the mirror going, damn, man, I'm doing good. Shoulders are strong. I feel good. You feel strong. Men always feel bigger and stronger, and women always feel tighter and sexy, right? When the muscles are in tone. I can take that same individual, pull away all those feelings, and leave you an ambiguous blob of musculoskeletal tissue, and automatically guys feel weaker and women feel fatter. And nothing has changed except your experience of the world, or the experience of who you are kinesthetically. Isn't that crazy? And yet you can destroy a self-image based off a feeling, and it's not even true. And how do you fix it? You go back in and you do some bridging, right? You spend 45 minutes in a good workout, maybe a factor 3 workout, and all of a sudden the next day, man, you're awesome all over again. And it's so subtle, and it's so tricky, and so manipulative, and we are so silly to let it happen and not to be aware that it is. We have enough shit to worry about day to day without letting the nuances of these little things go on unchallenged, and not even being able to recognize that they exist. All right, and there was a point. And I always get to it eventually. So bodybuilding got me into experiencing feeling, studying the human body when I got into doing rehab work, made me understand at a really deep level. And I started teaching my clients. They were exercising, and like most people exercise, I went to the gym today, there's 100 people in the gym, and probably 80% of them, of course, don't know what they're doing there. They're doing the work, they're sweating, but and it feels good, and a few body parts hurt, the joints ache a little bit, and they think that's success. Well, it's not. It's just, of course, it's just a disaster waiting to happen, unfortunately. So we started training people. We'd say, listen, well, first thing we want to do is that we need to train your core. Okay, so that's, it's doing sit-ups. I said, no, it's not sit-ups. And watching most people do sit-ups, so well, what do you, if you're training your abs, where do you feel it? Well, let me do a few reps. Where do you feel it? Well, I kind of feel it in my neck. Well, that's not your abs, not here. And people training their back and feel it in their forearms, right? People training chest and feel it in their shoulders. People training their thighs and feel it in their knees. And yet the feelings were there, and the feelings were being broadcasted to you, but you had no reference point to decide whether that was good or bad. So again, how do we make people successful in the world of fitness and actually rehabbing injury? We taught them how to interpret the feelings they were. This is the feeling you don't want, and it will show up because it's currently showing up. This is the feeling you're after. And not only do we give them the feeling you're after, so the feeling you're after is better. And this is what this muscle looks like under the skin. So here's an image, or here's a 3D image of the muscle contracting. That's what it looks like. This is where it is. This is what it feels like. That's what it looks like. This is where it is. This is what it feels like. And it takes somewhere up to the tune of 6,000 to 10,000 repetitions to set a brand new neurological pattern in the brain. Right? 6,000 to 10,000 repetitions. Now you think listen, I'm old. I'm not going to be around that long. This could take forever. But here's the interesting thing is that once you start thinking in that process, then all of a sudden, as you move day to day, can you not walk down the street? And I've done this with many clients. I've taught people how to walk, which sounds really kind of extraordinarily stupid, but I get people outside walking and I said, stand up. And I want you to sit tall and drop back into your hips. And I want you to think about pulling up in your pelvic floor so your bladder and rectal muscles tighten gently. And I want you to let your glutes move you down the road. And what was interesting is that the experience people had is that they thought they were walking like Monty Python, the School of Funny Walks. They thought they were walking like this. When I took a picture, it looked like this, but because they spent so much time doing this, it felt so different. They were so unaccustomed to actually standing up tall inside their own body. It's a very different feeling for them. And so I had to take a picture and say, look, no, you look fine. You don't look like, especially the women, because women have breasts, and women, walking down the street doing this, you're all of a sudden you got 5 guys trailing behind you wanting to buy you lunch. It's just an awkward thing for sure. But what ended up happening is that what they thought was happening was this, and all that was happening was posture. Because they were so tight here in the anterior part of the chest and shoulders that the pulling at it from standing up exaggerated the sensation of what neutral posture looked like. It looked normal. It just felt like Madonna bullet bra thing going on. So again, they would collapse because of the feeling, and we had to actually explain the feelings again. And I keep going back to this word feelings over and over again. So I've been training for, let's say, 25 years pretty consistently. I don't think I have any arthritis. My joints are fine, other than a little bit of muscle tendonitis every now and again. And the reason why I train the way I do, for the length of time the way I do, at the rate that I do, without the injuries that most people experience, is because I train based on a feeling. And I promise not to break out into song. One, because I can't sing. But feel free, if anybody can sing out there, feel free to join in. All right. So it's a feeling that I was looking for, and I thought about, okay, well, if I'm training my quads, I know what that feels like, and I know, so I'm stable, I know the feeling in my quads, I know what that feels like. That's amazing. Okay, well, then could it not be, is it not, perhaps could it be the same thing for the psychological reference point for how we think? We know what we don't want, right? We know how the world's going into hell in a handbasket. We know what the concerns feel like. We know what insecurity feels like. We know what rejection feels like, and we know all those things. And we have rich details. We have a beautiful map and a story, and got a nice cover on it, right? And it's all numbered, page 1 to 75 of all the horrors of my life. And because we know the negative aspect of our memories are very well detailed, we've got a nuance, a lot of language around them. But the more positive parts, of course, didn't. So the most reasonable thing would say, well, if the more positive parts of our life, which actually probably outnumber the tragedies of your life, and I'm sure they do. And it's actually it's an interesting thing. I'll get you guys to do it in a bit. But if the positive parts of your life, if they outnumber the tragedies, and yet they lack the nuances of all the negative memories, all the negative ideas that you've held across time, why don't we just go actually create some more substance underneath the better feelings and practice them? And I was talking to my good friend today, and we were saying, well, what would be, and you guys have been around me for a while, you've been in this conversation, what would be the 3 character strengths or values that if you could employ in your life on a day-to-day basis, or even just one, right? It doesn't have to be any particular number, but a couple probably would actually kind of fit the bill. What would those character strengths be, and what would it feel like to be in that space? What would it feel like if you could wake up in the emotional context that would make you courageous? So say, well, if I need more courage, one thing I was thinking about looking at looking at truth, trying to discover truth, right? And as I try to pull the fabric of my own life apart, try to figure out, how am I successful, and then why am I not successful at the same time? Where's the disparity in these competing values, and how do I get all these things to move forward? Because the contrast is devastating, right? This part of my life is rocking, and I'm just still a moron over here. What is wrong with me? But what's interesting, though, is that I'm accessing different parts of my map. All right, so I haven't created a coherent way of actually a coherent map. So let's say inside this map, there's 18 memories that have the emotions that are consistent with the values that I want to represent. Does that make sense? So if courage is a value that I need to represent in my life, in my lifetime, in my history, let's say courage showed up here, here, and here, right? And so courage is a part of the matrix of my history. But again, we know, and research shows us that we don't actually have a lot of details, not a lot of nuance to the ideas around courage. And let's say empathy and compassion are other attributes that I really need to bring into my life, because I know that's part of it. Missing me, I find myself really judgmental. I need empathy. Not only if I'm judgmental, but I'm non-empathetic to myself. I have my own issues. So let's say empathy and compassion showed up in 4 quadrants here. Okay, so we have, it obviously existed there somewhere. And maybe, what would be another one? Let's say joy. How about joy? When does joy show up? And I think that was part of our conversation today. And let's say joy actually has been a part of our experience through life. And it shows up inside this messy matrix here. But again, we know that the negative emotions are actually more powerful, right? They have more context to them. So I want you to do a little thought experiment. And now, if you've been on the planet for any length of time and you got a birth certificate, somebody has hurt you and somebody's messed with your life. It is what it is, right? So we all got the same dance card and somebody's punched it the wrong way. So it is what it is. So, and not to devalue our challenges, but here's the thing. I did it for myself, and it was a really interesting experiment, and it really actually it helped me quite a bit, and maybe it's because I have an analytical mind. But I said, if I look at if an angel was standing next to me, we use an angel, and he said, I got a stopwatch. Okay, your tragedy begins in, right? There's one event of your life. This tragedy begins in 3, 2, 1, go. And so the angel's there with the stopwatch, timing my tragedy. Right? Not how long I remembered it, but how long it actually took to occur. And 10 minutes and 32 seconds, hit stopwatch. Okay, your tragedy, okay, this month only, I only have one tragedy in this entire month, let's say the entire month of January, took 10 minutes and 38 seconds. There's 168 hours a week you're alive. But if you took a tragedy of 10 minutes and 38 seconds and you smeared that across 168 other hours and dragged that to the next week and dragged that the next week, it's a small piece of time. So I imagine, and again, and for me, it was really important for me to do this because I had to put it in context. And so I kind of did this little thought experiment saying, well, I bet I've been on the planet 54 years. Most of the challenges were, probably say between 6 and 15, the bigger challenges, right? I said, I bet there wasn't more than 3.5 weeks, 7 hours or 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 3.5 weeks, and of my entire 54 years of existence that were filled with what you could call tragedy. So if you just look at the ratio of shit going sideways and shit not going sideways, how much of your life was actually filled with non-tragedy? Most of it. Most of it. Unless you're living somewhere in a war-torn country where they're being shelled every other week. But even inside that, it doesn't happen every day. And there's periods of peace for a year or two, and then it all goes sideways again. But even in those places, there's still a break in the drama. And the reason for me for doing this is that I needed to put things in perspective. That most of my life was really okay. It was really good. And is really good. So we compress it down saying, and again, and by no means is this designed to minimize the impact of the stuff that we all go through. I'm not saying it's not impactful. I'm not even saying it's not relevant. I'm just saying it's not helpful. Because it's not what we want. It's not that we don't want to exaggerate something that's already, why give it that much more power? Drag it across decades of time when it took 10 minutes and 38 seconds to occur. And then it stopped happening. And then it was over. That's a lot of power to give other people and circumstances over our life. Way too much power. Totally over exaggerated. And again, and for me, because I struggle with this idea around forgiveness, and this is way more powerful. Just you ever seen those pictures where somebody's taking a photograph and they got their finger, they're crushing somebody's head in the distance. I'm going to crush your head like a grape. And for me, it was that way of condensing it down to make it insignificant. And if I could change the context of time, where it didn't seem like my entire childhood was ruined, there was moments in my childhood that were impacted adversely, but I still went and played with my cars the next day. I still ran my friends in the field and played. Right? So again, context is really important. So we can compress the time. Now, the other side of it is that we talked about these values and virtues living inside there. So, one of the common strategies that people have now is they say, well, listen, I wake up every morning and do my gratitudes. But when you do your gratitudes, does anybody write them out? Does anybody write gratitudes out in a journal? And how many lines would you write up, 2-3 pages of gratitudes, or would it be a paragraph or a couple sentences? Is it going to be a little? It's going to be a lot. Probably a little, I'm guessing. But if I asked you to write about your tragedy, what would you have context for? You could write a freaking book, because we just thought about it, replayed it, and twisted it, and massaged it, and we have all these rich details. And it goes back to the original problem when I first started talking about, is that we don't have enough nuances to joy. So why would you think you would be positive by reading a book or attending a seminar when we don't even know how this stuff works, and we know that negativity is a neurological derivative of our past designed to keep us safe, and it's almost 10 times more powerful than the positive aspects of our personage, and we do not do the work at the level that negativity is being worked at. There's nothing wrong with negativity. It's just you're right dominant. So if you come into me and say, listen, I got a problem in my back. Yeah, you're 80% right dominant. Well, I'm going to work on your left side, and we'll take you from 80-20 to 70-30, maybe down to 60-40. It'll never be 50-50. But we work on balancing it out. We don't work on and say, okay, we're going to paralyze your right side for the next 18 months, and you're only going to work on your left side. Completely let the right side atrophy, and maybe it'll catch up. There's power in my negativity. There's power in anger. And there's Jordan Peterson, who I think is an amazing speaker. He talks about righteous anger. There's power in anger. There's power in fear. And it's telling you, wake up, look around. And then you get to decide. And then you use your values to assess the environment. So to wake up and look around and just make sure you're safe. So you get the adrenaline push, and you're angry or you're wide awake, and then the better part of you steps in because you've actually set it up that way. And you learn to actually control the beast of it. But don't try to get rid of it. Right? Don't try to get rid of it because it's necessary, and you can't anyhow. Because the more you try to, and as this is Carl Jung was talking about, the more you try to bottle and buffer that negative part of who you are, man, that shit's going to show up in one part of your life, and it's going to blow a hole through the wall. You just can't do that. But you got to learn how to use it effectively. So with your 3 values, we talked about whether they might be for you about compassion or joy. Write a biography about them. If I'm grateful for my life, and I'm great, and I want this is this feeling I want to live in, joy is the feeling, is the way I want to express myself most of the time if possible. I want to be able to experience joy more often, right? It's not going to be you're not going to be Barney the dinosaur, happy joy, not going to happen. But you can have more experiences of joy on a daily basis. And do you want to cultivate that experience, or do you want happenstance to perhaps show it up? And every now and again, joy, you walk in the house and you step in a pile of joy. Oh man, I got joy all over my foot. Just totally unsuspected. Or would you actually rather surgically design and create and craft the essence of joy inside your nervous system and be able to give you access to it when you need it, when you want it? So it's more accessible. So it's never going to be as powerful as negativity. Negativity will show up very fast because it's important. It's an important part of who we are. But it wakes us up to the possibility of actually accessing some of the other emotions that we practiced and thought about.
Yeah.
Right? So if I start writing about joy, and my journaling is about, okay, I am joy, right? I am courage, I am whatever. These are the values that I want, because I know if I embrace these and learn and exercise these values on a more constant basis, I'll be able to really actually step into parts of my life that I've allowed to be limited, because I allowed 1974 to show up and control most of these, the shadowy parts of my life. And when you work on that, when you work on developing your consciousness about those emotions, all you're doing is you're accessing the episodic memory banks and you're looking for evidence. But here's this kind of cool. When you start looking for the evidence of it, and your brain goes, okay, today I'm writing about joy here. Let's say joy was when you're 10 years old and you got your first pet, and you know it was a big stretch for your parents. You had a lot of money. And but they got you in anyhow, and you know how much they must have loved you, and this pet was just the most amazing thing. And write about it. Write the details of the freaking story. Like, write about it, all of it, as much as you can, and write the story, and write the story, and write the context of it. If you're trying to describe to somebody what that was like the colors, and it just like grab as much detail. And when you start feeling, when you start re-feeling the experience of that time, not only don't only look at the feelings, well, that feels really good, but where do I feel? Where was that embodied in me? I need to landmark it and put your hand on it. If you feel it here and it's vibrating in your chest, put your hand on it so that you have this kinesthetic marker of this experience that you recall. And pull it in detail. Because I know joy resides in me. Specifically here. How do I know? Because I dug it up. I found it, right? It's an old shoebox, a bunch of pictures, but I dug the freaking thing up. I went hunting for it, not wondering why it didn't exist, right? So when you dig it up, all of a sudden you found one joy, and let's say, and over the week you're writing about joy and courage, and then let's say the following week you wrote about joy again, and you found another joy. And the brain loves patterns and say, hey, it's, Tanya, she wrote about joy, and she wrote about courage, and she wrote about truth, and she wrote about it again and again, and she's thinking about the stuff a lot, and of course with her brain, she's dreaming. Now her mind's consolidating memories, and it's actually, creating this little patchwork quilt of really cool memories for her. And she wakes up in the morning and she has a big smile on her face. Yeah, I feel really good today. I don't know why. I feel really good. Because you're freaking doing the work. Because you're actually in there telling the brain what you want. And the brain saying, guess what? We've already had it. We've already had the experience. And after a while, what happens is that joy and courage and truth, all these things start to consolidate. Because neurons that fire together, wire together. And when you're in the habit of, which people are not in the habit of, when you're in the habit of thinking in a particular way, in a very specific way, and with these nuances, when you think this way, and you feel this way, and you pay attention to it specifically, and you lay it out, and you have schematics, and the schematics is the story that you wrote with the experience that you had, and the feelings that were occurring, and where you felt it. And you do that over and over and over, and you write the biography of every incredible part of who you ever been. And in a short period of time, what will end up happening is that I said it takes 6,000 to 10,000 repetitions to reset a neurological pattern if I'm trying to rehab a broken body part. Well, so 2 weeks into it, if you're consistent day in, day out, and you go to bed and you're thinking about it, you wake up and your brain, of course, is massaging this material together, how long will it take before your brain actually starts going there on its own? Before it starts giving you that information voluntarily? and you see something, and you see kids playing in the park, and you go, oh, that little seesaw thing. When we were kids, and my brother, and he jumped off, and I fell off and broke my tooth, but it was kind of funny, and all these things start kind of popping back, right? So you retrieve it's from your long-term memory, and you get into this retrieval, recoding of information, and you make it applicable to who you are. You start breaking down that veil between, the life that you think, the adult you think you are, and the childhood you think is no longer there. It's there. It's like a book you haven't read in 10 years. Pick the freaking book up and start reading it, and some extraordinary stuff in there. And then over time, what you end up getting is that, the brain will start doing this on your behalf. It starts pulling all this information forward. And here's the kind of key thing, and I won't babble on too much longer because God knows I have the ability to talk endlessly. is that the negative feelings will show up, and that fear and shame and guilt and all this shit show that, and the emotions that kind of take us off track, that will show up. But guess what shows up just as quickly? All the good stuff. And now you get to decide. Because unless you do that, you have no choice but to go with the horror story. You have no choice but to numb it out and pretend that you're okay and life carries on, and you're hoping one day, 12 doves on the side of a cross will fly over your house and everything will be okay. Right? Not likely to happen. Because you remember that the fear mechanism, our adrenal, our stress response, there's three elements to it, right? There's fight, which is fine. There's flight, which also is fine. But there's also numb. And that's what I know. I've been there. Avoidance tactics, numbing, right? Ignoring it, right? Saying it's not that bad. And so numbing, and Brene Brown was the first person to say this, and I remember this clearly as day. She's going, you can't selectively numb emotions. If you numb one, you numb them all. Like all of them. They're all connected, and they're all important. So the only way to, I think, well, not the only way, but the way that I've seen for myself to be more courageous around the conversations, how do you bring that part up? How do you have the courage to do that? Well, first of all, don't do it with the emotional context of a 10-year-old. Don't. There's no don't do it with the fear of a 10-year-old, of a 13-year-old. That's why you can't face it, because you couldn't face it back then. And if you pull that emotional mask forward and you put that back on, what makes you think the 13-year-old has matured at all? That makes sense? That's why it doesn't change, because you're still referencing the same spot on the grid. But if you knew courage, and you knew joy, and you knew truth, and you knew compassion, and you had access to this other beautiful series of emotions, and you start pulling them up, what you end up finding is that a lot of the stuff will start to kind of diminish. And a lot of these things will start breaking away. And I know for myself, I remember a time when I was 4 years old, I fell off a 2x4 to a drainage ditch and almost drowned. And of course, I had a fear on water, obviously. And I was, I think probably a couple of years into doing work and actually just trying to understand all this stuff. I was sitting on the couch with my wife at the time, and I was tired. I closed my eyes, and it's almost, I was in this kind of meditative state. And I had this very vivid image of me walking, and this me as the age I was then, right? Probably 10 years ago. And I was walking up to the drainage ditch. I could see the young version of myself. And as soon as I got close, he hopped on my back, and I walked him across. Now, I hadn't planned for it. It's not what I had tried to do. But it was a way that my brain was starting to consolidate memories. And was starting to realize that myself as an adult who's done all this work has something to offer the parts of me that have not yet had access to my knowledge. And what is the point of you doing all this work in the modern, in the present tense of who you are, if you never actually take it home? Does that make sense? Because the work actually has to go backwards in time. The work has to trickle all the way back to all these spaces. Because that's where the damage was done, which is why we're suffering today. But if you're just putting a Band-Aid on it and you're unwilling, you don't have to go into the horrors of life and, and open up ugly boxes. It's not necessary. But if you go into the joy of life and the joy of your history and all those things there, sometimes you'll find that there's no more monsters under the bed. Because how many more fucking books are we going to buy on the same topic and never feel better for the ending of the book? How many more courses are we going to continue to take and not feel that we've gotten any further than the last $6,000 we spent on courses and books? Yeah, seriously. And this is my own life I'm talking about. I don't know what your problem is. Right? And I go, man, I got to get, I should start lending books out here. I should charge people to take books out of my house. But here's the fascinating thing is that over time, what I ended up finding was that my reading became more specific. My reading became more targeted. I became less frantic in the things I was trying to figure out. I was solidifying my philosophy in life. And it wasn't a frantic search for something to save me or to make me feel better about my life. And it was more now I was interested in the journey forward, and it seemed like the way I was thinking, because I was trying to consolidate my philosophy around life, and I'm thinking a lot about this, is that all these things started to find their own place, and things that didn't matter no longer show up. But I know what the feelings are that I want to express day to day. I know what anger feels like, right? I know what fear feels like. I know what excitement feels like. I know what shame, I understand what this feeling, but I get to choose because I know which ones I want. And I don't dismiss them when they show up. I just decide whether or not they're appropriate in the context of my current situation. Thank you, fear, for waking me up. I didn't walk out into traffic. Thank you, fear, for reminding me that there's a part of my life that perhaps I'm not emotionally resolved yet. It's not, I don't have the fear show up and say, you made me feel bad. You made me feel ashamed of myself. You made me feel this way. The feeling comes up and going, hey, that's not the one I subscribe to. I see, these are my 3 chosen feelings, how I want to live through life. I wonder where this other one came, because it's out of context with how I declared I'm going to run my life. So I'm not buying into it. I'm just going to recognize it. I can go explore it if I like, but I'm not putting it on. I'm not allowing it to go in here and open a bunch of Pandora's boxes and ruin my week or my life. Just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. And that goes the same thing. Just because you feel it doesn't mean you have to put it on. But if you don't know how you wish to feel, you have no choice but either to get into the feelings that are being offered to you, right, through reaction to a circumstance, or you'll have to numb them. I don't know what else there is, unless we consciously decide on what the feelings we are looking for. And that takes work. And you have to work at it. And you got to go figure it out. But I think they're already inside of us. So, so again, I'll close off with this. It's just, think about the acronym SAM. So, Sylvia smiles. SAM, in the physical context of life, I know that I can have an incredible amount of success I've had for years, getting people to first think about, how do I stabilize my body? And how do I know I'm stable? Well, I know the muscles that are involved in stability. I know what it feels like when I turn them on. So I have a really good reference point. I know exactly what that feels like. So I'm stable. And then the A in SAM is activate. The activation is the target, right? So the target muscle. So I know what the target muscle feels like. So I know how to stabilize myself because I practice stability. I know what the target muscle feels like because, well, I also took the time to feel the muscle I'm trying to train. And the movement happens as a beautiful byproduct of those first two things being put into place. So it's the same thing emotionally. If you cannot, so what is the stabilizing set of emotions that you want to run your life with? How do you want to feel? What does it feel like? When have you felt that before? How many times are you willing to practice and going through the process of feeling that? Well, as long as it takes. But it won't take you as nearly as long as you think. So if I can stabilize my life by deciding what is the feeling context of my life that I prefer to be in, and make allowances that, fear and anger and shame may show up occasionally, but again, they're not doing anything other than asking you, what do you think? And if you do enough work here and going through the history of joy in your life, the history of courage, and the history of you when you were always enough, and that big context of life where your whole childhood was this ugly show, and it becomes a small little thing where it becomes a footnote in the history of your life. Because most of it was good. And you have to go back, and that's the work. That's the work for me, and I think that's the work for a lot of us. We gotta go figure that part out. When you journal, make sure you journal well. And the first couple of weeks, it'll be tough. Your brain may fight with it. You may sit down, you got nothing to write. Then just write the word, I am joy. I am whatever. Write the words out. But it's the habit of the habit, and be diligent because your life is worth it. It really is. And if you can get into that part of it, if you can do that kind of work, and on a daily basis, take 5 minutes out of your life, time it. And just write. Write your 3 values. Maybe do that for the first week. Just write it what the values are. I am this, I am this, I am this. These are the values. And just be done with it. Don't make it complicated. Right? I'm not asking you to do calculus or advanced trigonometry. But what I'm asking you is to do kind of a group experiment with me, because I through different parts of life, I excised, I cut away my history this many years ago, and I made a terrible mistake, and I tried to surgically remove all my history. And what happens is you leave a big void, and all of a sudden you become nothing. Again, when you try to consciously numb out the worst parts of you, what you consider the worst parts of your life, you numb out all of it. So you don't have access to the joy anymore, right? You kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. So we need to go back and we need to kind of recontextualize those experiences and remember that, proportionally, there was that much tragedy and that much real life happening. And change perspective on that, and you'll only get a real good beat on that when you start actually writing down on a daily basis, writing the biography of who you were and how that felt. And then you'll find evidence of that, because again, what does the brain do? The brain takes incoming information and accesses it and matches against your history. And if you start popping up all these parts of your history which are really beautiful and kind of fun and silly and joyful and courageous and truthful, and all these beautiful aspects of your character that show up over time, and they're readily available, and the small dark shit show of your life is really hard to get at, you'll see beauty and joy in every waking moment. Because the brain is looking for something to reference for. Give it something beautiful instead of offering it up the same shit show of a story time and time again. It has no other choice because you're not giving it anything else to think about. And as I get older, as I move into my mid-50s, my conversation is going to be a little bit more aggressive and pronounced because there's more years behind me than in front of me. But I just know so many people are frustrated and like myself, and if I'm taking a chance by having conversations like this because it could go sideways. luckily, I'm, it's just the advantage of being a 220-pound philosopher is that people rarely come up and call you a moron to your face. So, that's the only upside of it. They'll lash you in social media, but they rarely come up to you and call you an idiot. But it's good though, but it's a chance you got to take. Because I know that the journey that I want to go on requires a lot more people thinking and feeling the same way, and having the ability to have those kind of conversations. And I live for these conversations. I live for them. Yeah, if you've been around me long enough, I don't talk much about anything else. But to me, it's so important. So, guys, that's all I got to say. Thank you for investing your time. I know we all got lives, but I appreciate you investing your time in this conference. And give me your feedback. If there's, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying this. Hey, it's just I had this thing in my head, and I got to get it out because something's gonna blow, right? But the more I have these conversations, the more I learn. And the more you're willing to engage in the conversation, say, yeah, I thought that was a really good point, but what about this? Because I want to learn more. I want to, what can we do collectively with a group of very intelligent minds to move ideas like this forward? What else could we do with it? So that's it. I got to go. My mouth is really dry. It's 9:07. It's later in other parts of the world, but thank you. Thank you again for investing your time. I truly appreciate it, and I look forward to more dialogue. Just let me have it. And this whole process. It's why I created the I Am Project, and it's if you go look at it again, I'll put the link up on my main page. But I created a whole series of courses, and we went through each part of life, from wellness to spirituality to finances to career, and looking at my whole life and how do I make all these things fit together so I'm not at odds with myself all the time. Where if I make inroads towards my wellness and spirituality, my finances actually seem to be taken care of. But how do we make sure that we live congruently so any action in one part of our life has a systemic, beautiful effect in all the parts of our life? And that's the kind of congruency we're looking for. Otherwise, we're always fighting, trying to balance life. And guess what? There's no such thing. You can be congruent and in harmony, but you can't balance. Because you don't have the same amount of time here as the same amount of time here. Balance to me is divisive. Trying to balance work-life? Really? You spend 8 to 12 hours with your kids every day? One, you want your kids to live to be adults, right? So that's probably not going to happen. And you don't have that kind of time. So there's a word of congruency and harmony, and that's something you start developing, and that's something that you'll start seeing. And if you want to have a look at the course, I'll pop in a coupon for a 30-day view of the first part of it, just so you see what the original context of the program is. But anyhow, guys, I said I'd go away, so I'm going to go away for sure this time now, for real. Thanks for hanging out, and like I said, just give me your feedback. I'd be interesting to know what you think. And,
thanks, David.
Yes. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time. All right. And I am out of here.